Hi, everybody, and welcome to the My Journey to Broadway webinar. I am playwright producer Mark Ricche, and today I wanted to share with you a behind-the-scenes look at what it actually takes to make it to the Broadway stage. So glad that everybody could join us tonight. Thank you. Now, I have divided this webinar into four sections, which I'll be covering over the next 20 minutes or so, and then we're going to bring on our special guests, the creative team behind the new jukebox musical Rock On, which will have its world premiere next year. We will also have time tonight to field a few questions, which you can drop into the Q&A tab throughout the evening. Not the chat tab, the Q&A tab. So let's go ahead and get everything underway. What we're going to be talking about tonight is the difference between what people think happens as opposed to what actually happens when it comes to producing a Broadway production. And I'll start with a little background on me in order to put things into some sort of perspective for everybody. I started my entertainment career back in the 90s in regional theater. I was an actor, a producer, a playwright, a director, so I know a little bit about how theater operates at the regional level. But for the last 18 years, I've been working in the film industry as an actor, producer, screenwriter, and director. So when I decided I was going to return to my theater roots and make Broadway my end goal, I assumed the journey would be somewhat similar. Now, what I mean by that is my business plan was going to be cut and paste. In the film industry, you produce a film and then send it off to any streamer that welcomes independent projects like Amazon Prime or Apple TV, and your product enters the marketplace. So I figured all I needed to do was write a show and get a Broadway theater to produce it, right? This, I'd imagine, is what most folks think actually happens when it comes to Broadway. But in actuality, you don't pitch any shows to the Schuberts or the Nederlanders or any of the 41 other Broadway houses owned by literally one of 5 parent companies. What I discovered is that Broadway has this system that's been in place for decades. Now, that Hollywood system I existed in, it's ever-changing. The plate tectonics keep shifting, but Broadway hasn't evolved because it hasn't needed to. The system they created involves dramaturgs and table reads and workshops and producers and investors and lawyers and general managers and 13 individual Broadway unions, and like, whoa, this sounds like a lot of people, a lot of work, a lot of money, and even more time. Well, time I was going to have plenty of because within months of starting my journey to Broadway, COVID hits. Everything else on that list, however, was going to require some luck. I was basically jumping in blind without even knowing it because you don't know what you don't know. No matter what, it all starts with a story. And for me, my big Broadway idea began in my car in the spring of 2019. I was listening to the greatest hits album of the arena rock band Journey. And the more songs I listened to, the more I started to realize this band's music was literally a catalog of their collective life experiences. And then it hit me, that would be a great bio jukebox musical. But writing a show like that was then going to involve life rights, and I didn't want to deal with anything complicated like that, so I decided to write a more fictitious story using Journey's music, and thus Journey the Musical was born. Now, because I had worked in the film industry for roughly 10 years, I understood the importance of IP. Intellectual property has literally become the foundation of the entire entertainment industry. As of early 2026, truly original, non-IP based shows on Broadway, shows that are not adapted from movies, books, jukebox catalogs, are rare and represent a very small fraction of the total productions produced. Journey was just the sort of IP I could latch onto my project to give it some traction. I mean, after all, they wrote the country's national anthem, Don't Stop Believin', right? But before I started writing, I figured what I should do is pitch this idea to my mentor of some 30 years and see if he thinks the idea is worth it. So I met with a gentleman by the name of Mike Deanna, who's here tonight, and he's kind of like my theatrical Yoda. He was not only intrigued by the idea, but he told me once I was done writing it, he'd be happy to send it along to another gentleman that he mentors who just happened to be a Tony Award-winning Broadway director, and I thought, hey, I'm in. 18 months and 3 workshops later, Mike sends my script off. We figured it would take that Tony Award-winning Broadway director a year to get back to us. So in the meantime, I kept myself busy by learning as much as I could about Broadway. I began calling people, cold calling, like the lead producer of Rock of Ages, a wonderful gentleman by the name of Matt Weaver. Yes, I cold called him. It was September of 2020. COVID was at its peak. People were picking up their phones. We had nothing else to do. Now, Matt shared many words of wisdom with me, but 2 things really stood out. 1, He told me, this is going to take you 10 years, so you get ready for a marathon, man. And I thought, well, we'll just see about that. And 2, he turned me on to a fellow producer, a music rights acquisition expert, a woman by the name of Janet Ricche. Thanks to Matt, Janet took my call, but warned me that I would need to build a solid team before approaching a rock band as significant as Journey. She said, these guys know the value of their catalog, Mark, and they aren't going to hand it over to some nobody without a single Broadway credit to his name. Build a team and get back to me. Well, little did Janet know my script was being reviewed by a Tony Award-winning director, right? And that's when the very first miracle of this show occurred. Guess who got back to us in less than a month? That Tony Award-winning Broadway director, and he provided a wealth of notes, but none as important as this final comment. He said, the band's never going to sign off on this. You really need to tell their story. It would be so much more appealing to them. What? Did he just say rewrite the script? It's going to require me to start from scratch, a full year of research at least. Is this why this takes 10 years? And how much are those life rights going to cost me? But hey, when a Tony Award-winning director tells you to do something, you do it. So I buckled down. 9 months later, summer of 2021, we send that Tony Award-winning director a copy of our new bio musical. We figure it'll take him at least another year to get back to us. That'll give me plenty of time to... Nope. Literally 1 month later, we get a reply email. He says, hey guys, I think you got something here. And our response is, so you're saying there's a chance. This alone gave us the encouragement to forge ahead, conduct a proper polish of the script, because after all, story is what's most important. So I wrote and rewrote, and we held more table reads, and I continued to research, and then one day I came across this interview with Steve Perry, the lead singer of Journey. In the article, Steve says he would never want the behind-the-scenes story of the band ever told. It would ruin the illusion. Holy... Do I tell anybody? No. I keep this information to myself, but now there's this dark cloud looming over everything that I'm doing. Then Janet's words started echoing in my head. Put together a dynamite team. Give yourself every advantage. Now, in regional theater, building a team means establishing a production team. And we already had a director looking at the script. But then I started thinking, what exactly does building a team mean for Broadway? On Broadway, building a team basically means getting yourself an executive producer who believes in the show and, more importantly, believes in you. Now, how the hell do I get a meeting with an executive producer? I don't know any Broadway executive producers. And that actually took me another year to figure out. Over the course of the next year, as I continued to rewrite, I began the process of building what team I could. I hired a personal lawyer. I reached out to various Journey fan clubs and established relationships. I even had several phone conversations with a biographer who was authoring a book on the history of the band. I saw the current lineup of the band in concert to get a feel and vibe for their audience. And by the spring of 2022, we are finally having lunch with that Tony Award-winning Broadway director. We're hoping he might want to be involved in a more official capacity. So he connects us with his agent, the head of WME's theater division. Now, we are moving up the food chain if we're talking to folks over at William Morris. But there is still that one elusive meeting that is out of my reach. How do I connect with a Broadway producer, an executive producer? And that's when I receive an advertisement in my inbox for a company called Theater Makers, run by Tony Award-winning Broadway producer Ken Davenport. Now, Ken is also an Oscar-winning film producer. I thought, man, this guy's a perfect match in heaven for me. The problem was the workshops his company operates are way out of my price range. And here I am hurting financially from COVID. I start thinking there's gotta be a back door, right? Somewhere. Scouring the Theater Makers website, I find one. I come across a workshop called Write a Script in 30 Days for $30. What was so intriguing about this workshop was that it was run by Ken's director of creative development, a guy named Eric Webb. You mean to tell me that for $30 I can get access to the director of creative development for Ken Davenport? Fast forward 1 month. The workshop is over. I have now spent a month building a relationship with Eric. So I email him and I ask him if he would consider passing along my Journey script to Ken. Eric graciously replies, absolutely would do so. But keep in mind, Ken usually doesn't do back-to-back shows of the same genre. At the time, he was working on the Neil Diamond jukebox musical, A Beautiful Noise. A few days later, I received an email from Ken himself saying, sorry, he wishes us well on the project, but his slate is full and he'd be passing on the Journey project. Back to the drawing board, I figure. Suddenly, I get another email in my inbox. It's from Ken's assistant. She'd like to meet. Why, I thought. Ken's already passed on the project. I remind her of this, and still she wants to meet, so we get together virtually. That 10-minute meeting turned into a 20-minute conversation, at which point she finally stops me and says, you really need to talk to Ken. I remind her, Ken passed on the project. She says, he'll be in touch. A week later, I'm on a Zoom call with Ken Davenport. What was supposed to be a 10-minute pitch turned into another 20-minute conversation. He wants in. He'll be sending over a contract. We did it. We got ourselves an executive producer. Contract arrives, just as he said it would, but Ken's asking for 5 figures in advance. And that's whether we get the rights or not. I didn't have 5 figures laying around. I told him we'll be in touch. The following week, we finally had a meeting with the head of the theater division at William Morris Endeavor. We discussed potentially attaching that Tony Award-winning director, but again, securing something like that was going to require upfront funds. I said, we'll be in touch. It seems like we had all of these doors opening wide, but none of them we could enter. We were still on the outside looking in. So I turned to my mentor and I said, Mike, might you know anybody who knows an actual executive producer? Mike says, I'll put my feelers out. Within a month, we had a meeting with one of his personal contacts, who happened to be working on a show that had an executive producer attached, one who might be interested in speaking with us. We set up a Zoom call. Enter Broadway executive producer Cody Lassen. In our brief Zoom chat, Cody wanted to know just 2 things. Why us and why now? Or was this a simple money grab? Now, as a screenwriter, I was always trained to be prepared to answer those 2 specific questions. I already had my answers prepared. I knew I was the person to write this because I had an affinity for the band and a respect for their legacy. I understood their music at a nano level. I mean, these guys had been branded bubblegum pop. They weren't. They were expert musicians whose music had stood the test of time. We still hear them on the radio. Let me be the one to show the world. And 2, as for why now, the answer was simple. The band's 50th anniversary was around the corner. Apparently my pitch worked. Cody agreed to sign with us and was willing to work within our budget parameters because he believed in the project. Now it was time to get development underway. Cody immediately laid out a game plan for us. We had to do the following. 1, establish our LLC, get investors on board, get the music rights secured, get dramaturgs to review the script, hire a legal team, hire a general management team, hire a director, hold the Broadway table read with equity actors, and he wanted to accomplish this all in 1 year. That's some 8-step plan. Alrighty, first, we need to incorporate. This is an easy process. So long as you remember one thing, you must spell out the words limited liability company on your registration application. It's a Broadway thing that Cody can go into in more detail when he joins us in a few minutes. All right? Second, we needed investment dollars to cover the costs of hiring all the new staff. My mentor had several arm's-length investors, folks that believed in him, and in turn me and the project now that we had an executive producer attached. So we raised close to about $100,000 in just a few months. Now, we need to build the team. Getting the music rights was going to require someone with a specialty in the jukebox music field. You see, acquiring jukebox musical rights is tricky. There are only a handful of people experienced enough to do it. Cody had just the person in mind. Her name? Janet Rich. But this time it would be Cody reaching out to her as the head of our new team. Then we hired 2 experienced dramaturgs to review the script and provide notes. We also hired Senderoff and Baruch as our legal advisors. They're a legal firm entrenched in the Broadway world. I already knew I wanted Daniel Kuney's team over at KGM to take over as our general management because they had done Rock of Ages, a show very akin to ours. They agreed and signed on. Lastly, we interviewed several directors and landed on Klein, who at the time had recently directed the Grateful Dead jukebox musical. We were set. Last but not least, in December 2023, roughly 1 year later, we held our first Broadway table read, packed with equity actors, including several stars from the original Rock of Ages show. I soon realized building a Broadway team starts with hiring an experienced producer who can add legitimacy to your project. Soon enough, 2024 kicks into gear, and I begin thinking, we did this. We're finally on the accelerated path. Only 5 years have passed. I was going to beat Matt Weaver's prediction of 10 years, guaranteed. And that's when our first major roadblock presented itself. Things had been stalling on the music rights acquisition front. It had been a year without significant progress, and we couldn't move forward without the rights to all the music. Janet was overwhelmed with her own Broadway production at the time. We were going to need to expand the team, but who? Not many people do this. It's a specialty. Ha-ha! Our search took us nearly 6 months when in September of 2024, we began having conversations with a gentleman named James Rocco of 30 Saints Music Licensing. James is with us tonight. Not only had James trained with Janet, he had acquired the rights to the song Don't Stop Believin' for a previous production he had worked on, so he had a history with Journey's management. We signed a contract immediately, and literally 1 month later, we received word from Steve Perry's legal team. I'll never forget it. It was the day before Christmas 2024. Steve Perry was passing on our project. He was holding true to his statement from decades ago. You see, Steve had maintained his portion of the music rights, even though the rest of the band had had already sold them off to a publishing company. So without Steve's blessing, we weren't going to move forward. Everything hinged on him. We had an emergency meeting that evening. I asked, is Steve passing on this project or on all projects related to Journey's music? That's what was unclear. The reason I asked was because I had that other script that had Journey's music in it. Remember the first draft? In that script, I didn't tell Journey's behind-the-scenes story. Don't forget, I was the only one who knew Steve Perry didn't want that story told. So James figured, what do we got to lose? Well, let's not ask for the entire catalog, though. Let's just ask for maybe 5 songs and play it safe. What? That's going to require me to rewrite the script and fill the blanks in with all new music. Oh, my God. And that's how I spent my Thanksgiving weekend of 2024. Never stop believing, right? The problem was that old script I had, it hadn't been workshopped for the last 6 years like the bio musical had. It was awful. It was a first draft. What I needed to do was twist our current script into a non-bio musical about Journey, using only a few of Journey's songs and filling in the blanks with other music from that same era, and I needed to accomplish this task in 5 days. Needless to say, I met the deadline. We submitted that new draft to Steve Perry's legal team and requested 5 of Journey's minor songs. Within a week, we got word from Steve. He declined again. Great, so now I have a team, but no show. I began thinking, if I could do the show with only 5 of Journey's songs, it's possible I could do it with no Journey songs, right? I mean, heck, Stereophonic was about Fleetwood Mac, right? And they didn't use any Fleetwood Mac music. I spent December of 2024 rewriting the script. By January 1st, 2025, we had a newly recrafted show entitled Let's Get Rocked, a story about 2 siblings passionate about rock and roll, pulled apart by the industrial music complex and pitted against one another in a battle of the bands, only to reunite through the healing power of music. Everybody on the team loved it. We pivoted. We began furiously trying to acquire music rights for everyone's favorite classic rock songs from a host of familiar artists. A publishing company would turn us down. We'd simply squeeze in a different tune and rewrite the script to fit. I mean, it's the same business model Rock of Ages employed. Little by little, we began attracting major artists such as Bon Jovi, Pat Benatar, Guns N' Roses, Heart, Styx, Kiss, Rush, Cheap Trick, Bryan Adams, and we didn't stop there. We were even told by Def Leppard, you could have our song Let's Get Rocked, but you had to change the title of the show. So we did, and our show henceforth became known as Rock On. We held table read after table read every 2 months or so, with rewrites taking place in between. And then our executive producer told me, we're going to hold a Broadway 29-hour workshop in the fall of 2025. A what? I asked. It's basically a workshop where equity actors get together and put your script through a stress test. Great. How much is this going to cost me? Not that it would have made much of a difference, because by this time we had run out of our initial development funds. I had no idea how I was going to pay for anything at this point. I stressed all summer long, entrenched in rewrites and table reads, all the while worrying that I didn't have any time left to schmooze with investors. By the way, whose idea was it to have the poor playwrights be responsible for funding these shows? My only break from the stress literally was going to the movies once a week with a good buddy of mine, a tradition we had held for like 15 years. And one night he asked me, man, what are you so stressed out about? So I tell him, I asked him, he asked me, how much money are you talking? I'm like, I downplayed the severity. I was like, just enough to run a thing called a 29-hour workshop. He says, tell you what, set me up a meeting with your executive producer. I'm thinking, seriously? Huh. So, the following week, we held a virtual chat. Not only did my buddy show up, but his mom was there. Then they told us how much they were going to invest between the two of them. My jaw dropped. It fell off. An investment that size would be enough to cover not only the 29-hour workshop, but get us all the way to the production phase. I was floored. It was yet another miracle that fell into our laps. I later asked my buddy, what made you dive in with both feet and drag your mother along for the ride? And he replied, look, man, I don't get Broadway. I probably won't even be around long enough to see a return, but what I do believe in is you, Mark. You've always set a goal and you've gotten to the finish line. I believe in you, man. And with that, we powered onward through our 29-hour workshop in the fall of 2025. Then it was time to begin the final steps leading to Broadway. Those final steps include securing a theater for what is called a out-of-town tryout. A what, I ask? You see, before a Broadway house will even consider your show, they need to know it actually has legs, reviews, some sort of audience reception. So these out-of-town tryout productions are held at regional theaters, and they require what is called an enhancement payment to help support a regional theater's budget for the show. I asked, how much is this going to cost me, man? Find out? Yeah, my jaw falls off again. This is going to require another miracle, I'm thinking. But believe it or not, this is how any show makes its way to Broadway, as our special guests tonight are about to tell you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to please welcome the creative team of the new Jukebox musical Rock On. Tonight we have with us for a nice Q&A session Broadway producer Cody Lassen of Cody Lassen and Associates. We've got co-producer Mike Deanna. We've got James Rocco of 30 Saints Music Licensing. We've got Melina Rabin of the Lighthouse Ladies. And if you guys all would do me a favor and click yourselves on so that we can see everybody, I'm going to take myself off the spotlight. And everybody's here. Awesome. So thank you all for joining us tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed that trip down memory lane. I know some of you guys probably weren't familiar with the entire story, and now you have it. So I'm going to go ahead and ask if our audience has any questions about the show, about the journey, about what it takes to get to Broadway. Remember, please put it into the Q&A segment, not the chat. While we're waiting for those questions, I'm going to go ahead and ask each of you if you would be kind enough to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your work in the industry, what you're working on currently, perhaps, and we'll start with Cody.
I'm working on this musical called Rock On that you all just learned about. Mark did a great job of recapping. I don't, in this industry, never take no for an answer. If you need to go right, you might have to make 4 lefts to get there, but you'll get there if you keep trucking along. So we produce on Broadway, off Broadway, regionally, 70% theater, 30% film projects, and a few music projects every once in a while.
Cool beans. Mike, you want to jump in as our co-producer?
Mike Deanna. I taught for 51 years, mainly theater, directed over 100 shows. Met Mark a long time ago when I did festivals in the Maryland region, and brought Mark in to teach workshops for me. And when I retired, Mark called me the day after I retired and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I just got retired." And Mark said, "You're not retired anymore." And I started working for Mark, reading his scripts, and we enjoy a lot of give and take on our rides back and forth to New York for all those activities that are going on discussing the show. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you very kindly, Mike. James, if you want to jump in.
Hey everyone, I'm James Rocco from 30 Saints Productions and 30 Saints Music Licensing. I started in the business as a child actor in New York, and have worked on all sides of the table now, Broadway, national, international, regionally, as both a performer and director and producer. And during COVID, I started licensing the songs for a show that I had written. The licenses had expired. And the next thing I know, 50 shows later, I'm still licensing music for people.
50,
and
really?
I
Wow.
gotta say, you did it right. There are so many people that call me and they say, we're in rehearsal. Can you help us get the rights to these songs? And you're like, holy cow, man, you just sold a project that you don't have the rights to do. And they close their shows.
I'm not shocked by that. No, actually, when I had first started with the Journey project, we had a gentleman over at one of the published theatrical rights worldwide. Said, "Oh, so you got the rights?" And we were like, "Well, no, we're going to start that process." And he was like, "I wouldn't have even written the show unless I knew I had the rights." So yeah, typical. Melina, you want to jump in and share some stories and mention something about the incubator known as Lighthouse Ladies?
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Melina Rabin. I'm a dramaturg and an actor here in New York, and I'm also the resident dramaturg with the film and theater production company Lighthouse Ladies. One of the things we do is, and one of the things that I kind of sort of spearhead is taking in new scripts and providing script consultation, coverage reports, and working with writers to sort of help realize their vision, which is how I got involved with Rock On back when it was called Let's Get Rocked back in June of 2025. And that was really cool. It led to a lot of really good conversations with the show, about the show itself with Mark and Mike. And then from there, I was involved with the 29-hour workshop, which was Lighthouse Ladies' first involvement with the 29-hour workshop, which was really, really exciting. It's been a while.
And last but never not least, we've got Rayshaun Sandlin. Rayshaun is working as as Cody's second-hand man. He's normally the one that hears from me on a daily basis.
Yes, thank you, Mark. Happy to be here. Thank y'all for having me. Appreciate it.
How long have you been working with Cody?
Oh, goodness. Almost 2 years. Yeah.
Has it been that long? Wow.
Almost, yeah.
We were working with Matt before you, and
Yep.
I think he's with us tonight. Actually, he was
Yay, hey,
eager to
Matt.
hear how things had progressed with the show when he shifted gears.